Good morning. Today is April 13, Tuesday. The time is few minutes past 9. The Insurance Committee of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly is now in session. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Carr, Sapicki, Freeman, Hawk, Hicks, Hodges, Johnson, Lafferty, Mitchell, Powers, Rudd, Smith, Terry, Thompson, Wyatt, Vice Chairman Rudder, Chairman Kumar.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, do we have any personal orders? If none, I will take a personal opportunity to welcome Mrs. Kara Garrett and her friends, representing Representative Johnny Garrett. Ms. Kara, you're welcome, and thank you for being here. On our calendar today, the first item is House Bill 0636 by Chairman Smith. Chairman Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do have an amendment, 6804, for this particular bill that does indeed rewrite the amendment, rewrite the bill, excuse me.
Yeah, we have a motion on the bill. Do we have a second on the bill? We have a second. Now we are going on to Amendment 6804. Do we have a motion on the amendment? We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Chairman Smith, would you like to adopt the amendment and then tell us about the amended bill?
That would be favorably received. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Without objection, members, we are voting on adopting Amendment 6804 to House Bill 0636. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. Chairman Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. House Bill 636, as we have discussed in subcommittee, as well as having had some dialogue in this committee, we know that our Tennesseans are paying more and more out of pocket for their health care, even when they do have insurance. What this bill does is establishes in code a process through the Department of Commerce and Insurance to ensure that networks are indeed adequate. We're witnessing on a growing level that the issue of surprise or balance billing is an issue. While indeed there is a federal air quote fix that's in order, we are still seeing more and more people struggle. And if the chairman would indulge me, I want to read just a couple of letters that have been sent to me from individuals. Bristol Anesthesia Services sent on March the 14th, 2020, a letter to me talking about their status as the sole provider of anesthetic and perioperative services to Bristol Regional Medical Center. They were informed by a healthcare entity that their reimbursement will be cut by 50%. If they did not accept that cut, they would be out of network. I received a correspondence on May the 8th, 2020, from the Anesthesia Medical Group that served over 10 hospitals, 13 ambulatory centers, and included 500 anesthesia providers. They were told to take a similar cut. I received on January 31st of this year a notification from a radiology group where their patients had been informed summarily that they would no longer be in network. I received on January the 8th of this year from Middle Tennessee Respiratory Services that serves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rural counties around the Bedford, Coffee County area that for several years they've been trying to get in network to be a provider of oxygen and respiratory therapy. What we're finding is it's more and more difficult for people to ensure that there are indeed adequate networks. The purpose of this bill, Mr. Chairman and committee, is to have access plans filed on an annual basis to the Department of Commerce and Insurance. The commissioner will promulgate rules and ensure that there is not a hardship placed on patients and that will indeed be able to receive their care. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to take questions, but I do ask for support of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, do we have questions? Members, do we have questions? Chairman Powers, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sponsor. I do have one that I'm kind of a little bit concerned about when it talks about jeopardizing the federal funding of $9.5 million. Is that still anything that's in jeopardy, or could you clarify that for me, please?
Yes. Chairman Smith?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you from my colleague, Chairman Powers. The Department of the Bureau of TennCare has been removed, as has Cover Tennessee Kids. I'll get it out in a minute. And the reason for that has been simply that the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services require that particular care be under the jurisdiction only of CMS. And so that's why the fiscal note is actually $9 billion, not million. And so we removed them from this particular bill. They have their own federal standards. This would apply only to the privately insured. Thank you for the question.
Chairman Powers?
So would they, one other question, would they still be covered with what you're trying to do with your bill with the people that are under Medicaid and Medicare? Would they still be covered as we're trying to do with these other?
Chairman Smith?
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. There are standards, adequacy standards that are determined by the Bureau of TennCare, and I think it's very appropriate for this body as well as the department, our health committee, to engage with the Bureau of TennCare to ensure that there are indeed adequate networks, Chairman. So I share your commitment to making sure that we have adequate networks in both the Bureau of TennCare as well as in our commercial pay. But this bill, the only jurisdiction as far as this bill would be under Title 56, which is the commercially insured.
Chairman Powers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Hodges, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two questions. So the letters you talked about getting the insurance company notified the physicians that they would be getting a 50% reduction. Wouldn't that be good for the consumer if they're lowering the costs? And then I'll just ask you the second question too. In here, there's a misdemeanor for changing or for not adhering to certain things in the bill. So the question would be if a doctor, you have to give notification, a 90-day notification, I think, for any changes in the policy. If a doctor was to get orders, her husband or his wife was to get orders to go to a different base, get transferred, and that physician that they're married to also has to obviously leave at that point, and they leave in 60 days. They didn't give a 90-day notification that they'll no longer be, accepting Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee because wherever they move doesn't have that insurance. Would they be in violation of that misdemeanor?
Chairman Smith?
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll take clearly the first question first. It's interesting. I wish that there was a free market pressure point already that reimbursement rates did match the cost of care, because clearly I think that we would see a different healthcare market. However, for a provider to be informed that they're going to have a 50% cut in their reimbursement for the delivery of care does not translate into a lower cost for the patient. That has not been the case. What we have seen over the course of time, unfortunately, is nowhere in healthcare are we finding the cost to the patients go down. Instead, we're seeing higher cost out of pockets to patients, and it's only through the control of reimbursement are we finding that the management of utilization is used, and you're reducing utilization rather than the cost of care. And then on the specific issue, and you're gonna, I may have to ask the indulgence of the chairman. In the case that are you talking about a physician that's on on an Army base delivering care? Would this be within the VA system? I want to make sure that I'm not misspeaking.
Representative Hodges.
Thank you. No, just a dependent or a spouse of an active duty soldier. You know, obviously they get orders to PCS fairly quickly at times. And so if they get orders to leave Fort Campbell to Fort Hood, Texas, and you know, their spouse who's an active physician in Clarksville doesn't have time to give a 90-day notice of change of policy, is that going to be, are they going to, you know, be in violation and potentially result in a Class A misdemeanor?
Chairman Smith.
And I appreciate the question. Again, that's one of those one-off circumstances that I don't have the answer to. I think that in that particular case, in contracting, if you are a provider and you know that your practice is going to be influenced by, you know, your likelihood for deployment, I would assume and appreciate the fact that providers would engage in contracting that would mirror their circumstances. But in a particular case like that, I don't have the answer. And again, because this is all promulgated under the Department of Commerce and Insurance, that is the construct that's permissible for the commissioner to exert that. I really do believe that Commissioner Lawrence and his staff would most likely engage in reasonable accommodations in such a case.
Representative Hodges.
Can we just get a legal opinion on that real quick? Just because it is a concern. Just
Okay, sure. Without objection, we'll go out of session. And do you want to restate your question for legal?
yes. So does that individual that has to potentially leave in a hurry, you know, if they're accepting, like I said, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee or Aetna or whatever they're accepting, and they get relocated or assigned to a different location that doesn't accept that insurance, and they have to leave within 90 days, would they be in violation and would they be subject to that Class A misdemeanor?
Jamie Shanks, Office of Legal Services. I'm not aware that in the bill that there's language that specifically speaks to that instance. As has been mentioned, it does say directly that a violation of this part is a Class A misdemeanor, subject only to the fine that's provided in there. But as also was mentioned, the commissioner has been authorized to promulgate rules to effectuate the purposes of the part.
Representative Hodges. Thank you. We'll go back. Do you have a question?
No, not a question, sir, but just a comment while we're out of session.
Okay, Chairman Smith.
Thank you. And to my colleague, I know within contracting now, there already are provisions and aspects that, and I'd be happy to hear from a colleague who's a doctor but as I understand it, there are current provisions in contracts. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. There are current provisions in contracts that discuss terms of departure and leaving a network. And essentially, I think that the desire here is, as you heard those other 4 letters, and there were others that were sent, is that currently the leveraging power is very one-sided. And what we're trying to do is equalize and kind of stabilize the particular access to the market, both on the payer and the provider side. But thank you for your indulgence, Chairman.
Well, thank you. I don't really know whether that physician is employed. If they are employed to another entity, then it is the entity's job to provide alternative coverage. If the physician's in private practice, then there are guidelines from the Board of Medical Examiners that help you guide through properly closing your practice to leave. And they would just have to check with those guidelines and comply. If no other questions, we'll go back into the session. We already did that. Chairman Carr, did you have a question? You recognize? Okay. Chairman Terry, you recognize?
Thank you, Chairman. And to follow up on a point in those letters, and to the representative that talked about the from a patient standpoint, overhead for physicians and physicians' offices has, with all the new regulations and everything that's gone on, has crept up significantly, and it may be 65, 75 cents on the dollar that's going towards overhead. When you have in rural areas, one of the issues that you have, particularly in some of those areas, is the payer mix. And understand that TennCare may pay as low as 10 cents on the dollar. Medicare may pay 25 cents on the dollar. It's significantly less. And so when you have these, I would say, predatory contracting, where you're, having somebody, take a 50% cut, or you're not going to be in the network, then at that point in time, if you take that cut, you just have to know that your payer mix is going to be cut significantly, and you may be out of business. You may be selling your practice. You may be moving. And so access in rural areas is a problem. And if you go out of network, know that right now, oftentimes physicians in private practice will sign a contract that is 90 cents on the dollar or 85 cents on the dollar. But if you're kicked out of network, you're probably going to be charging 100 cents on, the entire amount. And so from a patient standpoint, you may be getting the entire bill of 100 versus 90. So, or you may be losing access because those providers may have to move. So I just wanted to bring that out and bring a little clarification to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Terry. Jim and Smith, did you have a response?
I just simply want to just revisit the bill's purpose. And the bill's purpose is to empower our Department of Commerce and Insurance to ensure that premium holders in the state of Tennessee have adequate access to their primary care physicians, their specialists, their emergency care. And I will tell you, colleagues, one provision in this bill that we should all take great pride in is we have added to the definition of an emergency mental health services and those type of services that would be considered in a mental health crisis or an emergency, which have not otherwise been covered in healthcare coverage and adequacy addresses. So I think that with all of our emphasis and attention that we've been given in recent years to mental health, this is a terrific provision. And finally, we have all spent a lot of discussion points and time about the issue of surprise billing. The underlying cause of a surprise bill is out-of-network care. And so many times, Tennessee patients do not realize that they are going out of network because of either an outdated directory, which are taken care of in this bill, or just the fact that they just don't have access. And so with this particular bill, we're not putting into code anything other than allowing our Department of Commerce and Insurance on an ongoing basis to monitor the adequacy of networks to make sure that premium holders get value for their premium and that they do have adequate care. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll renew my motion and ask for support.
Thank you. I would like to clarify one thing where mention is made that TennCare will pay 10 cents on the dollar. That's a relative term in the sense that a physician knows that TennCare for this particular service is going to pay me $100. He can choose in his billing to put a charge of $1,000 or $500 on it. There is no limit on what the physician charges. So the $100 that TennCare is going to pay automatically becomes 10 cents on the dollar if the physician chooses to charge $1,000. And because there is no limit on what a physician can charge. So that can be a bit deceptive. And as true that TennCare compared to regular market insurance pays less, but to quote one of our kindest people, TennCare is doing God's work. And that's what physicians are doing when they do take TennCare patients and work for lesser reimbursement than others. Members, any other questions? Are we ready to vote? Without objection, we are voting on House Bill 0636. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The bill moves on to GovOps. Thank you, Chairman Smith. Item 2, members, is House Bill 1379, and since I will be presenting it, the gavel will pass to Vice Chair Rudder.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized on House Bill 1379. There are some, we need a motion and a second. Are some amendments on this bill, Chairman Kumar.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to adopt Amendment 6666, and that will be the only amendment that will be adopted, and it makes the bill.
Without objection, we'll go ahead and put this amendment on the bill, and then you can explain the bill. Without objection, all those in favor? Opposed? Amendment is on the bill. You're recognized, Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I bring to you the Tennessee Pro-Family Building Act on behalf of 7,000 strong Tennessee Fertility Association members. These are passionate families who have suffered physically and taken on tremendous financial burdens to pursue and fulfill their dream of parenthood. As we notice that every birth in our communities is celebrated, and we know that parenting is a wonderful adventure and a great blessing. Considering the tremendous advances in medical science, treatment is available for couples who wish to start a family but are not able to do so because of medical reasons. Unfortunately, the expenses of those treatments are very high and beyond reach of many families. Considering that the basic concept of insurance is that it is to be used for events that are rare but expensive, infertility treatments definitely qualify. You'll be touched by the deep commitment of these couples as they sought treatment for infertility conditions to build their families. This Tennessee Pro-Family Building Act seeks to make insurance coverage available to those would-be wonderful and loving parents. We do have special guests and testimony, and their stories are love and tears. I would also later on in the presentation like to go over the fact that 19 states do provide this coverage and the fiscal matters involved, as well as our carriers in Tennessee, 2 of the largest, do provide this benefit for their employees. With that, Madam Chair, I request that we move with testimonies that are on the list.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. Without objection, we'll go out of session. The first person we're going to bring up is Benjamin Sanders, Executive Director of Government Affairs, Farm Bureau Insurance, Tennessee, and Farm Bureau Health Plans. Please state your name and your agency for the record, please, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Benjamin Sanders with Farm Bureau Health Plans. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and address you all today. Let me start with 2 preliminary comments. First, I'd like to express our deep respect for our good friend, the sponsor of this legislation. He has a passion for this cause. We've had many discussions with him, we being the industry, We appreciate his diligence in allowing to hear our concerns and the time in his office. And so thank you greatly to the sponsor. The second thing I'll say is this topic is a good cause. And so it's uncomfortable to oppose a cause like this, but I'd like to offer a perspective on this piece of legislation. In Tennessee, 10.2% of the population is uninsured. That number should be higher. Considering the relatively low household income in Tennessee, the uninsured rate should be higher. Considering the relatively low health status in Tennessee, that number should be higher. Considering that Tennessee's not expanded Medicaid, that number should be higher. My point is, by all measurable metrics, the only reason that that uninsured rate is not higher is because this body, the General Assembly, over the last 50 years has been diligent, not levying the cost of regulations and coverage mandates onto companies and onto consumers. Any state with comparable demographics to Tennessee has a higher uninsured rate, primarily because of the regulations and the coverage mandates they've passed. Of that 10.2%, almost half of them make over $50,000 a year. Think about that. The fastest growing percentage of the uninsured population is not low income and indigent, it's the working middle class. That's because the people that are most cost sensitive are those that pay out of pocket for their individual policies, and those small businesses that have to offer fully insured products that don't have the luxury of being self-insured. This bill directly affects specifically those two populations. Now, someone recently accused the industry, and I use that term lightly, of just caring about a healthy profit margin. Now, consider this. Insurance companies operate on a percentage of the premium. If we operate on a margin, companies have every incentive for premiums to go up because theoretically our margin would go up. But the problem with that, and I apologize for getting a little bit peppery on this, the problem with that is that every company will tell you when premiums go up, doesn't matter how much, when they go up, we get calls from people canceling their coverage. Individuals and businesses decide every day if they can afford their insurance. Now, the difference in a pure coverage mandate and some of the, what I'll call the healthy disagreements we have on payer-provider relationships is a pure coverage mandate simply adds cost. There's no discussion of...
Excuse me, Mr. Sanders,
Yes,
if
ma'am.
you could find a way to one
Wrap it
sentence or
up?
so to wrap it up, we'd appreciate it.
I'll be happy to,
I
ma'am.
didn't tell you at first that you had 3 minutes, and I apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you very much. Our internal estimates are that this legislation would cost between $4 and $12 per member per month. So you can do the math, multiplying that by 4 people in a family. Now, certainly, my last statement, Madam Chairman, certainly this legislation will help people that can't afford this coverage. And that's the sponsor's passion, and we appreciate that. There are also people out there, especially in that range I mentioned, that want to start a family, and they're worried about losing their insurance because they want to start a family. There are people out there whose children are going through medical treatments, and they lay awake at night thinking what's going to happen if they lose their insurance. So I urge this body to consider the unintended consequences of this legislation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I think we do have some questions. The first on the list is Representative Hodges.
Yeah, so, thank you, Madam Chair. In the last decade or so, what percentage would you say premiums have increased due to these mandates? And just, I mean, if you can give me some kind of rough estimate or about, do you have any idea?
That's a broad question, Representative. There was a study done, I believe it was in 2010, a white paper by an actuarial firm on the effect of mandates in Tennessee. At that time, they estimated, and I'm going by memory here, sir, they estimated that 18.2% of the total premium dollar in Tennessee was attributed to either coverage mandates or various regulations that affect how we do business. In 2021, the ACA average benchmark premium in Tennessee is I believe $450 a month. So you can figure about 20% of that. I would say that 18.2% is probably still accurate.
You're recognized, Representative Hodges.
Thank you. And
But
so,
I do want to say that we have a lot of people to testify, so let's keep our back and forth short.
yeah, and so, look, I'm 100% in support of this bill, and I'm going to be voting on this bill. But I do think that we really got to start thinking this stuff through. And when we mandate something on an insurance company, we can't just pick on one party, right? We've got to start calling them all out, and we've got to have a maximum of what people are allowed to bill these insurance companies. Because at the end of the day, if we keep on the rate we're going, nobody's going to be able to afford insurance anymore. And that'll help somebody like me that believes in a single payer system. But I don't think the majority of the people sitting in this committee will agree with me on that. The bottom line is we spend a whole lot of money on healthcare every year. As a country, we spend almost twice GDP in healthcare is our European counterparts that cover 100% of their citizens. And the bottom line is our health outcomes are far worse than those countries. In a study on 11 countries' healthcare outcomes, we rank dead last. So it's not quality. We're just paying for bad service. And so at some point we've got to, if we're going to lay these mandates out, which I'm 100% support of, we've got to mandate the rest of it too. We've got to go all the way. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Next on our list is Representative Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I'll make it very short, but we heard a definition of insurance a few minutes ago about things that we were unable to cover. I want to give you Webster's dictionary, their definition of insurance. It's a coverage by contract whereby one party undertakes to indemnify or guarantee another against loss by specified contingency or peril.
It's an interesting question, Representative. I say this with respect and with the acknowledgement that I've not personally been in this situation, so you understand where I'm coming from. We would classify this in the habilitative service as opposed to rehabilitative. Almost all health insurance covered services are rehabilitative. There's an event and it indemnifies you, which is more of a P&C term. It indemnifies you to restore you back to that original spot. Does that help, sir?
Yes. Yes, thank you. And I have been in this situation, so I'll leave my questions to that though. But I just wanted to make sure that under that definition, I was trying to figure out how that would be defined. When we're looking at this type of service. Okay, and thank you, Madam Chair.
The next person on our list is Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So how many Tennesseans are covered by insurance?
If I'm not mistaken, sir, out of a population of 7 million, I believe close to 6 million are covered with some forms of insurance.
So you're saying this is going to cost between $40 and $70 million a year to the insurance companies?
I can't do the math that quickly, sir.
Well, if it's $4 a person,
Understood. Yes, sir.
yeah,
Oh, well, it depends. This bill wouldn't apply to the entire population. It would-
right. Exactly. So it's going to be a small fraction. So I don't see how you can multiply that by all the policies, $4 to $12 a member to get there. I don't think this will cost that much. And, to address something that was said earlier, it is a loss. It's a great loss to a family, to a couple that's gotten married, started their life, and then they want to begin a family and they hit this brick wall over and over and over again. So I just, it's going to be hard for me not to support this bill. And I just don't think the costs are that great. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mitchell. Chairman Kumar, did you have?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to point out that on Amendment 666, there is a fiscal note. And on page 4 of that fiscal note, the 4th line says average per member per month cost is 90 cents. So we don't know, this is calculated by our fiscal review department, and it's really a very thorough calculation of what the percentage of people who have infertility, what percentage need treatment, how many of them will have, the exotic or the most expensive forms of treatment, including IVF, and calculating all that. It's very well done, again, by our thorough Department of Fiscal Review, and their estimate is 90 cents per month per member, and not $4 or $12 or anything. Again, page 4 of that fiscal review that it goes with this amendment that I have filed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. Next on our list for questions is Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And for the guest, Mr. Sanders, currently, is there an average, are you aware of what the average benefit, let's say that we choose to move forward with this? In the chairman's bill, there is a cap on this of $100,000 for the benefit. In the industry of insurance, what is the average, I guess, of a covered benefit should this be adopted? Because $100,000 is a lot of money.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. There was some discrepancy last week, or some confusion, excuse me, whether the caps that we have seen are annual or lifetime, and that certainly makes a substantial difference. And it may be clarified in the amendment, I'm not certain. I cannot think, Representative, of any other covered benefit that has a dollar cap on it. There are some, and there may be some, I can't think of any off the top of my head. There are services that carriers offer that limit the number of services, like chiropractic visits, for example. Most policies limit the number of visits you can make. I'm struggling to think of any covered benefit that has a dollar cap on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in your estimation, because I know in reading some information that's available online, some states do put a cap as low as some $15,000. In your industry, is there a model legislation? Is there some sort of information that would give us some, I guess, a benchmark to understand what a reasonable benefit coverage would be? Or in the case of my colleague, Mr. Sapicki, I know that he had submitted an amendment that would make this an optional rider, where the premium holder could indeed apply part of their premium toward this type of benefit. If you could speak to that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
I'll answer several of those. I'm unaware of any model legislation that has come through, or model act that has come through NCOIL or NAIC that would speak to this, to your first point. On the issue, the question of the caps, likely one reason that you don't see that very often in insurance is back to Representative Powers' issue, because if the point of insurance is to rehabilitate, there's no dollar limit, because when you're rehabilitated when your cancer is in remission, when the bone is healed, when the surgery is over. And that's somewhat divorced from a habilitative service, which is, I think, also underscores the point of why some states might use caps. And then to your last question, as far as a reasonable cap, I'm not sure, Representative. We haven't discussed that.
Representative Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. I can clarify that one, we did check with legal as well as with the Department of Commerce and Insurance to say that, yes, caps are legal, they can be applied. And that's also true with the business community who wanted this. Cap of 100,000 is relatively high. Yes, it is a lifetime cap. On the Senate side, the emphasis is on a 50,000 cap. And my Tennessee Fertility Association are good with that. So in an effort to decrease the fiscal note further, adjustments are made on the way to Finance Committee, and we plan to do that to make it better. Once again, the cost already per member, as predicted by the Fiscal Review Committee, is 90 cents per member, and I think we can even make it better. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. The next on the list is Representative Lafferty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you know approximately how many, or have there been any estimates of approximately how many consumers of the insurance products are up against that edge of, if my premium goes up too much, I may not be able to keep coverage?
Mr. Sanders.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There was a study done in the late 2000s, Representative, or maybe shortly after 2010. It was a nationwide study, the only one that empirically speaks to your question that I'm aware of. And it demonstrated that for every 1% nationwide, for every 1% increase in premium, 400,000 people would drop coverage. Now, that's a very broad estimate. I can tell you for us, I have polled our call centers before because I'm curious on when the phones start ringing when premiums go up. What our internal folks tell me is that when premiums go up $10, they start getting calls on what kind of coverage can I drop? What kind of deductible can I raise? When increases are $20, we start getting calls, I can't afford the coverage anymore.
So we've spent a few minutes talking about cost. These costs translate to people. This bill is I don't think there's anybody up here that would say outwardly, this is a terrible idea. There's not anybody up here that would be frankly that heartless. But what we're talking about, even small moves spread out over millions of people with what may seem to us in this room to be small cost, what's cheap to me may be a luxury to someone else. As we move premiums higher, we've talked about it with the previous bill, Medicaid, all the socially funded patients, those doctors providing services don't get reimbursed as much, which creates a situation where then the private market must make up the difference through higher insurance premiums. Again, these are people. I know we're talking about dollars, but this all affects people at the end of the day. When we do this, if we take those people that are on the edge now and we put them in a situation where they make that decision to drop coverage, they then become the socialized side of healthcare, which further increases premiums and brings more people to that edge. I don't really have a question to follow that up, but this touches a lot more lives than just the folks that are here today to talk about this bill. It affects a lot more people, and it's hard for us to perceive sitting in this building what we do and how it impacts those people out there making those payments. With that, Chairman, thank you. I've got no more statement.
Thank you, Representative. I have Chairman White.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I do have a question for Mr. Sanders, but I need clarity. There was multiple amendments we went through on Amendment 6666. The coverage for surrogates, that is still in the bill, correct?
That is true.
Okay, thank you.
It's, I'd like to add that it's a very rare event. It's a very, very tiny amount of people that would avail of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sanders, my question about the third-party coverage of surrogates is, from the insurance perspective, what is the limit of coverage? If you have a third party enter into, you have a couple who has the insurance, but then you bring in a third party, do we have enough protections, Bill, that the medical needs of this third party, which could be multiple that you may not know about, how much coverage, healthcare coverage does that person get, whether it's related or unrelated to the pregnancy? And then what if healthcare issues arrive during the pregnancy, and once the 9 months or the child is born, what is the liability for the insurance company for the third party that has been covered during this time? Yes.
Madam Chairman, may I? Thank you. Chairman White, that very question has caused a good deal of discussion in the insurance industry. And the short answer is we don't know. We've never had a situation as a company, if you will, or an industry where legislation has required us to do business with a third party with whom we don't have a contract. Now, I'll presume some of the parameters of this coverage would be spelled out in the bill or the amendments. I'm not suggesting it's wide open, but it does beg some of those questions. First, how broad that coverage would be, what is related to the maternity benefits of that third party, and then how far do those extend? And frankly, sir, we're not sure because we've never been in that situation before.
Thank you, and that does give me concern, and I'm taking what we're doing very, very seriously. It's an emotional issue in many ways. My daughter's oldest son went through IVF also, so I understand the procedure and what it does for a couple. But the surrogate issue of healthcare coverage when you're bringing in a third party, which we don't really know all the health issues that person may have. Thank you.
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to clarify that third-party coverage does exist. And one example would be organ donation. If I want to give a kidney to my sister's plan will cover it because she's the patient. I am not. I may not even have insurance coverage, or I definitely may not have coverage under the same contract that my sister does. So third-party coverage in that situations exists. It applies to the particular condition. It's not that if I become covered by the insurance company for donation of a kidney there, and later on I develop another problem, that they're going to cover that. So that in this situation, third-party coverage will be that the patient or a woman does not have enough eggs. Eggs need to be donated by somebody else, and the eggs are harvested, and the insurance coverage will be limited to that. Similarly, for obtaining sperm and other things, insurance would be limited to that. In the surrogate situation, the patient has eggs, her spouse has sperm, they're fertilized, but the implantation is complicated because of problems with the uterus with the patient. So a surrogate may come into that picture, and the pregnancy would be covered just as it would be covered for the patient themselves. So the cost to the insurance will be the same. There are ethical issues, I understand, on how we feel about surrogacy, but the cost to the insurance company will remain the same as if the pregnancy occurred in the patient themselves. I hope that clarifies it, but again, third-party coverage is known in and commonly used in transplantation.
Yes.
Just one last follow-up question on that. In a bill such as this, how important is the third-party surrogate coverage? And I'm asking that, you're a medical expert, I am not.
I'm not sure I fully understand how important is surrogacy.
To a legislation such as this, why was it added?
It appears to be part of the standard for infertility treatment, according to the various associations, the premier of which is American Society of Reproductive Medicine. It is one of the things that they offer and consider after all other efforts have failed. It was added again. The legislation it's complex legislation, and it is modeled after standard treatment that is recommended by the preeminent authorities and associations.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chairman
Madam
Kumar. The next person on our list is Representative Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Sanders, I have one question. I want to go back to this where our fiscal note says it's 90 cents, which that would be, does that mean if there's a family of four, it'd be 90 cents per each one of those? And then the other question I guess I want you to clarify is our people here are looking at the QHPs and they're getting 90 cents per person, and you said it's going to be $4 to even more than that. Could you explain the difference in 90 cents and $4? That's $3.10 sway difference there, please.
Yes, Mr. Sanders. You're
Mr.
recognized.
Chairman, I will address that. I'm not sure if I can explain, but I will be glad to address that. To your first question, the 90 cents presumably would be per member, so per member of the household. In the insurance industry, we use PMPM, per member per month. So an individual would be one, family of 4 would be multiplied by 4, a family of 10, and we have some families 10 in our book of business would be that times 10. To your second point about the disparity of the cost, I confess I have not read the calculations from the fiscal note, so I can't speak to whether they're accurate or not, but allow me to tell you how we develop numbers. Insurance companies use actuaries, and I'll try to be brief, Madam Chairman, but I'm going to go around the barn for just a moment. Insurance companies develop rates using actuaries. And an actuary is a mixture of an accountant, an economist, to some degree a fortune teller, because they predict future risk. I say that tongue in cheek, of course. Their job is not just to identify the cost today. Their job is to predict the cost in 12, 24, 36 months down the road. When we submit our insurance rates to the Department of Insurance, who has to approve our annual premiums every year, we have to use, by law, we have to use actuarial data. An actuary has to say, this is what it's going to cost. And we get the call or the question all the time, can you do something about my rates? Well, we don't develop the rates. Our actuaries do. And in fact, actuarial science is so specific. There's 19,000 actuaries in the whole US. There are very few of them because it's such a specific science. So a lot of companies actually use actuarial firms because it's such a specialized science. So with that being said, sir, when we develop cost impact of legislation, we have to send that to our actuaries and they calculate it. And let me give you 2 points on that. In calculating a cost, there is the rate of incidence, how many people would use a benefit, and then there's the cost of the benefit. On the rate of incidence, that can be a tricky number. If you say there's this many people today, and I'm using an example, that get LASIK surgery. So if we pay for LASIK surgery, is that same number going to get it tomorrow? Well, no, because the question is not how many people getting it today will get it tomorrow. The question is how many people will get it tomorrow when it's paid for? And that's a really hard number to estimate, which is why actuaries are so good at what they do. So the rate of incidence is the first. The second is the total cost. And let me give you an example on that. I read about a medical procedure recently. It was a $1,000 shot. 75% of the people that got it had no side effects. Now, I won't bother you with the details, but 25% of the people had severe side effects. If you were looking at the accounting rate, what is this going to cost? An accountant would say $1,000 per person times however many people. But the actuary would say, no, the cost is the cost of that plus the 25% of people that spend 2 weeks in the ICU. So actuaries look at the total cost over time. I believe personally that in this case, and that was a long explanation, that our actuaries look at the total cost of it. Fertility treatments usually result in higher pregnancy costs, for example, more time in the NICU, more incidence of rate in the NICU. I believe that's where the cost disparity comes from. They're including the total cost over time. Does that help, sir?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have time for one more question before we have to say goodbye to Mr. Sanders, because we have other testimony today. That would be Chairman Terry.
Thank you, Chairman, and appreciate you coming to speak. And on this issue, I appreciate those that are going to come up and speak after you. In the subcommittee, I was a quiet yes on this bill, hoping that we could get some resolution of this. I just want to clarify some stuff. And my colleague from Knoxville gave a pretty good summary of the issue. But based on the premiums currently, you said with a 1% increase, potentially 400,000 decrease in those that will be insured. And with potentially from a $4 to $12 per member per month, I mean, that may be anywhere from 400,000 to 1.2 million that may go off of insurance with this and push them either into the uninsured portion or towards being on TennCare. Currently, this amendment shows state expenditure of 3.7 million and subsequently after that, 4.7 million. that would cost the state. In addition, federal dollars of 4 million and 8 million. So obviously, as the costs go up, you're going to lose people on commercial insurance. It's going to, and the uninsured goes up. So in speaking to the payer mix that we had on the other bill, it's going to make it much more difficult in rural areas. Those of us that are trying to, without expanding Medicaid, to get those uninsured that we have in Tennessee insured, this bill is going to make that more difficult for us to do. In fact, it's going to increase those other roles. And for those of us that are trying to get commercial insurance to the uninsured, it makes it much more difficult. So I've gone from a quiet yes on this. I'm going to be against this bill. I'm going to be voting no. But thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Terry. And thank you, Mr. Sanders. Kara Garrett, could you come forward, please? Thank you. Please turn on your microphone, and we'll need your name for the record. But I do want to caution everyone, you have 3 minutes, and we have to be out of this room at 10:30, so time is of the essence. Go ahead, Ms. Garrett.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar, Vice Chairman Rudder, members of the committee. My name is Kara Garrett. I have worked at the National Fertility Center. Oh, sorry, I'm an RN. I've worked at the National Fertility Center for 15 years. Part of this bill addresses fertility preservation for cancer patients, and these patients are my passion. These are patients of childbearing age who have just recently been diagnosed with cancer, and they must move quickly. For women, the cycle entails a couple of weeks of injectable hormones, a routine surgery where we retrieve the eggs under anesthesia and then freeze those eggs for future use in an IVF cycle. Soon after, sometimes even the same day of their retrieval, these women begin chemotherapy and/or radiation, and cancer treatment has come a long way, especially in younger patients. More and more of these patients are surviving their diagnosis, but many times the treatment renders them infertile. These patients, their spouses, their parents need to know that they have the possibility of starting or continuing their family. Hope is vital for patients with a cancer diagnosis, but there are many times when a patient or their parent tells us they can't afford to do the procedure because it's considered elective. Cancer is never elective. Just last week, we saw a 13-year-old boy with cancer. A month ago, a 17-year-old girl with cancer. 3 months ago, a 32-year-old woman who delivered a healthy baby and weeks later was diagnosed. Yesterday, a 28-year-old woman with cancer. I have 2 more patients coming into our office to see me tomorrow. I really could go on and on. Imagine being these patients, their parents, their spouses. I know for Johnny and myself and so many of you, our children are our world. They are our hope. They are our future. They are our reasons. I know we have this amazing technology, and just because someone has cancer, their hope for building their family should not be taken away. It's essential that fertility preservation is recognized, made available, and covered by insurance companies. Please vote yes for House Bill 1379. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Next up would be Candace Weiland.
Good morning. Is that working now? Okay. Good morning, Chairman Kumar, Vice Chairman Rudder, and committee. My name is Candace Whelan. I'm also an RN at Nashville Fertility Center. Although my journey with infertility started at the age of 24 when I needed a partial hysterectomy due to a complication associated with potential deadly clotting disorder. I was devastated, and that emotion later became dread when I met and married my husband. I was afraid we'd never have the opportunity to have our own children because of what I'd been through, but he loved and married me just the same, knowing that IVF and a gestational carrier was our only option to expand our family. At the beginning, we were young and just starting out. We knew we couldn't afford it then and knew what it would take. Fast forward 7 years, he became a commissioned officer in the Army, and I finished my degree and became a nurse. During the intervening years, we saved and planned until it was time to go for it. We rallied our friends and family, all the funds we had, and even took out loans for our first and likely only attempt, and had a successful transfer. However, 9 weeks later, we learned that we had lost a pregnancy. We were washed away from that experience in a river of grief, staring at a mountain of debt. It almost broke us emotionally and financially. Still, we were hopeful that we'd be able to try again. So 2 years later, after 9 years of planning, 2 IVF cycles, hundreds of shots, 2 loans, 2 surgeries, 2 transfers, one miscarriage, and about $100,000, our trepidation and fear of the unknown gave way to joyful bliss. And our family was finally complete, welcoming fraternal twins, my son Leo and my daughter Sutton, who are now 3. This was a long journey that had ups and downs and was financially draining, but holding these 2 miracles made everything worthwhile. Sorry. We are fortunate that we were able to make our desire to expand our family a reality, but everyone is not always as fortunate. So I know this bill will not have an impact on me personally, as my family is complete, but for so many in our state, this bill would prevent this unwanted roller coaster of stress and pain and give them at least the potential to grow a beautiful family. And as is often the case with policy proposals like this, what may seem insignificant right up to the point when you or someone you know is impacted by infertility. We ask for you to please vote yes for Bill 1379. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have a question. Chairman Smith?
Thank you, Chairman Rutter, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for both being nurses, speaking as a BSN, but also I'm speaking as a member of a family with adoptive family members, one of which was produced out of a very hostile crime. And what I know is that my family member went through a really tough time of infertility and went through treatments, unsuccessful. But I'm very blessed to have, as a family member, an adopted child. And children are important. And I wish that through modern medicine, as a former heart transplant nurse, I know that the beauty of organ transplantation. But I also know that we're not God. And sometimes we don't understand why certain circumstances come to us. I don't know why people have miscarriages. I don't know why we lose family members. But what I do appreciate is my concern, and there is a question that's embedded here. Are we picking in vitro fertilization through management of insurance policy over adoption? Because there are a lot of children that are looking for homes, even as we're speaking here. I do know in other states that this policy is tethered to not just infertility, but the money can be paid in a benefit toward an adoption. And what I'd just like to hear you articulate is, in both of your cases as nurses, what is the average age of patients that you see who are engaged in the infertility treatments, number one? And number two, how many treatments typically are needed for a successful fertilization? Thank you, Madam Chairman, for your indulgence.
Ladies.
Take it? Do you want me to? That's kind of a big, broad question, and our patients ask us this. It's very dependent on the age of the patient.
Excuse me, but I don't think your mic's on.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
This is Johnny's realm. I don't think it's on. Okay. Okay. So that's a big, broad question. There are lots of, so it depends on the age of the patient. It depends on the diagnosis. It depends on the sperm quality. There's so much, that you can say, what's the average success rate? So basically, Candace and I mostly deal with IVF patients. But there's also, in this bill, I believe it still talks about intrauterine insemination and other things that aren't quite as aggressive as IVF. Average age, we've seen patients that, I had a 28-year-old last week that has had 7 miscarriages. I've had, a 42-year-old, and, hopefully this is going to work for her. I mean, that's a big, broad kind of range. And I just think that, being pregnant and I love adoption. I think adoption's amazing. But being pregnant and, having our children when, Addie was down here last night, watching Johnny, and, just looking at her, she looks so much like him. And I just think you see pieces of him, and I don't know, it's just, to be able to carry your own child, I think is just incredible. And it's this technology can give us that. We've had up to 70% success rates before, so it just kind of depends. That's a big, broad question. I don't think I answered it well.
Thank you. We really don't have time for follow-up. We really need to get to we have two more people on our list, so thank you, ladies. Next, we're going to hear from Kara Edwards. Please say your name for the record and introduce your guest.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Kumar and Vice Chairman Rudder, committee members. My name is Kara Edwards, and I am truly honored to be here using my voice. As most of you here, I wear many hats. I'm a wife, a mother, a Jesus follower. I'm a court-appointed special advocate for foster care. I'm a small business owner. I'm the founder of the nonprofit Starfish Infertility Foundation here in Nashville. And I'm also the Middle Tennessee lead for the Tennessee Fertility Advocates and a miracle believer. Why do I believe in miracles? Simply because of the two I have standing beside me today. These are my 7-year-old twins, Bexley and Braxton. I'm sorry, she's 7.5. My apologies to the committee. In 2009, I was diagnosed with the disease of endometriosis and my husband with male factor infertility. Because of that, it took us 4 long years and I endured 603 injections in order to be standing here and celebrating these new lives. Even after finding success with my beautiful family, I couldn't simply walk away. I couldn't turn my back knowing that so many were still walking the painful path I had been down, and I'm asking that you not turn your back on them either. It's interesting that Cigna and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee actually provide infertility coverage to their own employees. Honestly, I commend them for that. They are stepping up and leading the way to do what's right for the people working for them. But let's be honest, if there wasn't a cost savings associated with it, they wouldn't be doing it. So as hardworking Tennesseans, we're simply asking for that same consideration. Now, I've heard the premium increases of $4, $8, $16 being thrown around, but look, I can assure you, we have truly worked tirelessly over the last months, making cuts, concessions, compromises, because we really do want to make this benefit affordable to people. Your own, as Chairman Kumar said, your own non-biased fiscal review came back at 90 cents per member per month. So, if that 90 cents is being passed along to our Tennessee businesses at $4 or $16, yeah, there's a problem, but it's not with this legislation. So I just truly believe it is time for Tennessee to be the leader when it comes to pro-family states. Together with the governor's foster care adoption, I love adoption. And together with that initiative and this legislation, we can be just that. We can lead this country in pro-family states. Our group of over 7,000 has grown, in just the last 6 months, and they're made up your friends, your family, your coworkers, your constituents, and they're simply asking for what every one of you have. They just want to stop being told that you don't need a child to live.
I have to interrupt your 3 minutes. Can you?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So last week, our pastor reminded us that we were sent here to seek and find God. And it struck me that I can think of no greater reflection of God than in the face of my children. So please help give the gift of these miracles to the other deserving parents and vote yes on House Bill 1379. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Next up, we have Tiffany and Roger Hale. Welcome, and please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members, for your time. My name is Tiffany Hale, and this is my husband, Roger Hale, and we currently live in Spring Hill, Tennessee. I have wanted to be a mom since I was a young girl, and little did I know that an event that took place when I was a child would have serious implications on me being able to have children with my future husband. In third grade, my appendix ruptured, requiring an immediate life-saving emergency surgery. And the effects of my ruptured appendix resulted in a lot of scar tissue and damage to my reproductive system, which was unknown at the time. I had no idea growing up that I may have issues conceiving, and here I am with this awful disease due to something that I experienced as a child to save my life. After marrying Roger in 2015, we were told the only option for us to become pregnant would be through IVF. At that time, I was also diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I was devastated, and we were devastated. We immediately started our fertility journey, and we're currently going through another IVF treatment where we will be transferring our final 3 embryos due to prohibitive costs of another 2 to 3 transfers. We have had many failed procedures along with countless doctor's appointments and multiple surgeries. These processes have cost us over $30,000, but we continue fighting because we desperately want to build our family. With each failed procedure, the emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial impact takes longer and longer for us to recover from. With each failed attempt, we are reminded as a couple that there is something wrong with me and that I am not like everyone else. We constantly ask ourselves, why not me and why not us? This bill would change thousands of lives for Tennesseans.
Do you have anything to share with us, Mr. Hale?
Yes, Madam Chairman, and just want to say thank you, committee members. Again, my name is Roger. I feel honored to be here beside my wife, Tiffany, as my partner, my friend, my bride. And I'm also honored that we get to share our story with you, to be a voice for thousands of others in the state of Tennessee that don't have the opportunity to be here to share their story with you. The disease of infertility is not just a female issue, it's a family issue. And as a couple, there are things that we can relate to each other on, and there are some things that Tiffany just carries on her own that I will never truly understand as we go through this process. And it's a helpless feeling as a couple when you can't explain to each other why this last IVF treatment failed. What did we do wrong? We did everything right, right? I try to be there for Tiffany emotionally, physically, spiritually, and obviously we're together financially in this process. But like it or not, the desire to have a family when you're fighting the disease of infertility is a costly one. And currently, as it stands in our state, no cash or no ability to acquire or rack up a mountain of debt, you have no attempt at growing your family with this disease. And there are many families in our state that may never know the joy of children strictly because of financial constraints. And that includes us. And I want to be a dad. I want to be a dad to our unborn babies. God has always been faithful to us in life. And I believe that one day that we will have children in spite of this disease. And I thank you all again for your time. I encourage you each to vote yes for House Bill 1379, to vote yes for families in the state of Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Without objection, we're going to go back into session. Are there any more questions for our sponsor? Representative Sapicki.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is an issue that keeps us up late at night. We have to sit in these chairs and make very, very tough decisions. My colleagues in front of me made a very poignant a point that we're going to have to go all the way if we keep doing this. What's next? What are we going to have to approve next? What are we going to approve next? And before you know it, we're going to be at socialized medicine. These are the votes that keep us up at night when we make these votes. This is a mandate of insurance. It's a very difficult choice. You hear these stories of these families, you see these children in front of us, and it's very difficult. The question I have for the sponsor is, there's been so many amendments filed on this bill. There's amendments that haven't been talked about yet. We keep trying to fix and to fix and to fix and to fix. Would not a longer discussion on this be wise to make sure that we get it right?
Chairman Kumar.
Chairman Speaker, I assure you there has been a lot of discussion, and it didn't start last month, and it has been going on with my Senate colleagues as well as each and every member of this committee. And that's why things have been adjusted and honed, and we've met with the governor's office for fiscal note considerations. So I think, yes, due consideration and a lot of discussion has been done, and that's where we are. We are moving at this time the best amendment, although, as I said, on the way to finance, we probably will make further adjustment, basically to make it less expensive for our society. But then again, as has previously been said, it's a very good cause. It's a very meaningful legislation, and I think we need to support these Tennessee families. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I do show a lot of empathy with the last few who've talked today. It's affected my family. My wife and I went through about 5 years of this, 35 to 40 years ago. And then recently my daughter has gone through, and son-in-law have gone through this, which culminated in my last grandchild born with IVF last year. But at that time, my wife had a Cadillac health program that covered infertility treatment. My daughter and son-in-law did not, but they had the financial resources to pay all this out of pocket. But I realize that very few families in Tennessee can do this. On the other hand, I do have a lot of sympathy with our testimony from Farm Bureau. And I realize that most of our medical coverage is covered by the insurance market these days. Otherwise, we can afford medical care for the most part. And I'm always very, very leery about adding another mandate to any insurance program. But sometimes it's really worth doing. I believe this is one of those instances. This is something that affects families everywhere. This is not the 1950s where most women start childbearing in their late teens and early 20s, and that we have a large adoption pool out there that doesn't exist. And we need to change this make a change for this time, and believe this is a warranted bill, and I intend to vote for it.
Thank you, Representative. Is there any more questions for the sponsor? Representative Powers?
Just one more, and I hate to, and I'll try to make it quick, but I've gone through this. My wife and I went through endometriosis, went through the DNC, did all that. Ended up, we had a chance to either continue on or do adoption. So I empathize with what you've had to go through, and I understand from that point of view. And we were not able to have children, but we've kind of adopted 4 little ones that we take care of all the time, and they're a handful. But anyway, that's beside the point. I guess the question is, and one thing when we're looking at this bill too, and the sponsor and I've talked about this before, but anytime we do anything, I'm always worried about fair and equal treatment for everyone that we're doing it for. And if we're leaving out anyone, if we're passing a law that doesn't provide that, if it's good policy, it's good policy for all 7 million Tennesseans. And I'm afraid when we start doing some things like this, that we're leaving some people out. So can you assure us, Dr. Kumar, that everybody in the state will be treated equally under this law?
Chairman Powers, I admire your commitment to family and what you have done, and the caring part that you bring to our legislature about covering everybody possible that would benefit from it. And I share your values very much. I think one question remains about TennCare, but please realize that in TennCare, there is cover kids, that coverage ends at age 18, and they are not eligible for this. Also, current qualifications for TennCare are women who have limited income, are in poverty, and are either pregnant or have young children. So they are not candidates for fertility. A very tiny number of members who are caretakers. And we are checking into that, and I think so. I think fair is fair. And again, with our commitment to doing the right thing, we would look at that. But then again, TennCare, let's realize, I don't know what I'll be able to do about it, because it's a safety net program. And the certain things in TennCare are different than they are in current. But I certainly appreciate your concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have another.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Another question, Representative Lafferty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, a terrible spot to be in when you're up here sitting in these chairs. It's a hard topic to cover. We are talking about a few thousand people, no doubt, that would greatly benefit from this. We keep coming around to money. I want to say it again. There are people attached to those dollars, very real people. There are friends, there are neighbors. They live in corners of this state that I've never visited. They also will be impacted. There will be cost put on those folks that may be already on the margin, and we may pull more people toward the margin. When I get those phone calls, why have my insurance rates gone up? What do I tell them?
Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Representative. Now, the point of fact is that we have not issued any mandates on insurance in the last few years, and the costs have gone up again. So really, I think this adds very little to it, but insurance costs going up are a routine thing. And all I can say to you is those calls are going to continue. Let us do what we can, but healthcare is very complex, with the federal government controlling most of it, which really leads to our inability to control costs, because federal government will mandate various things and so on. So, I mean, premiums going up is a feature every year. We all talk about controlling healthcare costs, and we will always continue to talk about it. But I think here, the important thing is doing the right thing for these families that deserve our help and care. But sincerely, insurance costs are going to go up the way the industry and our medical industrial complex is at this time, regardless of what we do. I don't mean to be callous about it, but I think you know that. You know it better than I do.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, sponsor.
Thank you, Chairman Kumar. Representative Sapicki. Question's been called. We have a motion and a second. We're voting on House Bill 1379. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Ayes have it. It moves on to finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for those who came and testified. I'm grateful, and I think it was a meaningful discussion. Thank you.
We're out of time, so we stand adjourned.